You ready?
Oh, yeah.
Let's fire it up.
This is the Hometown Holler. I'm Daniel Ayers.
And I'm Quinn Ray.
All right, well, welcome back to another episode of the Hometown Holler. Quinn, tell us what's going on today.
Oh, so we're going to continue our series on the year
Private
of public
school?
schools.
Oh, public schools,
That's
right.
right. That's where we're at. But I'm really excited about today. We've got a special guest in here. It's Miss Eugenia Floyd. She is a dedicated educator with 8 years of experience teaching fourth grade in Chapel Hill, Colorado City school districts. My stepmom actually teaches there now as well in Chapel Hill, Colorado City
Nepotism.
schools. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in history from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro,
Go
which
Spartans.
I also was a history major from UNCG, and completed her K-6 teacher certification at North Carolina Central University. Her commitment to professional development led her to pursue a gifted certification program with Elon University, and she also has a master's degree in gifted education she got in 2020. Recognized.
Now the big one.
This is the big one. Recognized for her excellence in teaching, Miss Floyd was named the 2021 North Carolina Teacher of the Year, and she currently works as a equity specialist for instructional equity and Jeans Fellow in the Chapel Hill Colorado City School District, focusing on creating equitable learning environments and supporting marginalized students. Ms. Eugenia Floyd, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all
Welcome
so
to the
much for
Holler.
having me.
Absolutely. I think one of the questions when I was I still am a teacher. I guess once a teacher, always a teacher. But a question I always got, and now I'm going to pay forward to you. What led you to become an educator? You could be so many things. What brought you back to the classroom as a teacher?
Well, the plan was not to be a teacher at all. I was a history major, and the funny thing is, we could have had some of the same professors.
All three of us, history majors.
Yes.
That's great.
Cool.
Love it.
I wanted to work in the museum, y'all. I
Okay.
wanted to be the person that was the tour guide for people coming into the North Carolina Museum of History.
Yes.
And I would tell you the wonderful stories. So for me, history was all about stories. And I just I fell in love with it. I also just was in love with the teacher who taught me in high school. And she was the history teacher.
Right.
And an avid teacher. So it kind of didn't work out that way. I told my mom what I wanted to do, and she said, no, you need to get some insurance and stuff. That's a retirement thing. You can't do that right now. And so I became a teacher assistant in the Chapel Hill, Colorado City schools, and then I fell in love with every second. If the teacher was sick, I loved being the substitute.
Right.
I loved the time that I shared with kids. I loved that light bulb moment for kids. And I was like, I need to make that happen in my classroom. And so I went back to school and got my teaching license.
Oh, hell yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I hope you will end up in the museum as a docent or volunteer in some way.
Yes, I have to.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the NC History Museum. If anybody, and Greensboro has a great history museum as well. North Carolina, we are very lucky with the museums we have.
Especially locally too.
Yes.
I know in Chapel Hill we have a wonderful space. It's the Marion Cheek Jackson Center. So if you literally can walk the walk walls and put on headphones and walk around parts of Chapel Hill to really get the historical aspects of the North Side neighborhood. So
Oh, I would love that. That sounds fantastic.
Of course you would. You like to reenact
I
history.
was going to say I play dress up, so that explains a lot in terms of how you got here. I think one of the things that stood out to me as I was preparing for this conversation is your specialty. Well, I mean, you're an equity specialist, right? So your specialty is equity. Maybe we could start there, specifically in instructional equity. What does equity mean in the classroom?
Right. So one of the things that's really important to me, and I think one of the things I believe to be true is we bring all of who we are into the classroom. There was no way I did not bring my love of history into my classroom. I brought my love of movies into my classroom when I turned it into the cinema.
Yeah,
And all the kids were their names were in the hallway in little packages like you were going to the movie theater. We do this all the time, which means we also bring all the parts of our identity into the classroom. So one of the things that we do in our office is we really work with educators. We also work with administrators. We also work with our cabinet leaders, and we work with our board members around what does it mean to make sure that we are providing a educational experience where children are affirmed, they're seen, and they're heard, especially our most underserved and underrepresented students. And so that's really a great deal of the focus of our work, because I think about, you could pull the data. We pull the data on any and everything.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really important that as you're collecting data, that you are critical about that. As a classroom teacher, I definitely sat in my classroom on days and was like, you know what? I am not teaching Eugenia. Something's going on there, and that's on me. It doesn't mean that there's something going on in her house. It doesn't mean that there's something, and there could be, but that's not what it's in the realm of my control. What's in my control is her educational experience. And how am I looking at Eugenia and seeing the assets that she brings into this classroom space and leveraging who she is, her interests, putting that into my lessons, engaging with her, but also partnering with her mother and her father around like the things that work well to educate Eugenia to the best of her abilities. And I think for me, a great deal of the work that we do is really try to emphasize to educators, you got to center humanity, right? Like we got to center like who children are, and like everyone is sending you their absolute best. And if we really want to do what's best for children, then we're going to really lift up who they are as people. And so that's a large part of my work. So,
I mean, I think that's really hard to, for white people specifically to do that. I was reading Let's Talk About Race, and they were talking about the school to prison pipeline, and how when you were talking about looking at the student and not looking at yourself in that student, we have too many in the system that it's in, right? We have white educators that are seeing and using language towards Black and brown students that is adding to this non-equitable just society, right? So instead of seeing how Black boys interact with each other, right, they're instantly talked about as being disrespectful or aggressive, where when it's two white kids horse playing, it's a little different. We think about, why are they doing that? How can we help? Instead of just instantly calling the administrators.
Well, we see that play out. I mean, I was reading the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, right? So there's a racial equity report card, and Black and brown students 3.8 times more likely than white students to receive a short-term suspension. Right. I don't want to like break things down too much, but I also don't want to assume our listeners know certain terms. Could we talk about what the school to prison pipeline is for somebody who may be encountering that term for the first time?
So, I mean, I think a lot of times that term, it gets thrown around in liberal activist circles. And when we start talking about trying to be equitable, but I think a lot of people use equitable and equal in a lot of different terms, or try to use them interchangeably, which is not the case. But what it is it's there's data out there, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but having the school to prison pipeline correct me if I'm wrong, Eugenia, it's more likely that students that get long-term suspensions, that get more disciplinary actions, SRO officers, zero tolerance type attitude, it disproportionately affects marginalized communities, and it turns out that they turn off of school, and it starts sending them from school to prison.
And so one of the things that you kind of lifted up is like what you just described is like almost like the policing of bodies in a educational space, right? Why can't I be all of who I am, right? If, my mom would have never believed, and this is why the family's partnership is super important. My mom would never believe a teacher telling her that Eugenia is very shy and she doesn't talk very much in class. You can't tell her that.
Right.
She's not going to believe that, but she will work with you. We can work together to really be that bridge and be that partnership and that consistency that Eugenia needs in the classroom for sure. So thank you for lifting that up.
We talked with Dyson Passion recently about this. I think part of this goes back decades, right? So starting in the 60s, in the 70s with desegregation, I was reading Education NC released a report. They said that an estimated 38,000 black teachers across the South were fired during integration, right? And so black teachers across the country decreased by 31%. Well, what does that mean for North Carolina? More than 3,000 black teachers lost their jobs to white counterparts by 1972. So the result is a majority white teacher workforce. Yes. 78% of teachers in the state, as of 2019, are white. 53% of students are non-white.
And just to lift up what you're saying, I think it's really important to highlight, it's one thing for us to talk about the profession. It's another that's really, really hone that into. That means there are generations of children who never had a teacher that looked like me.
Boom.
And that's not okay with me, right? Like, that's not okay. That doesn't make me feel good in my skin. That doesn't make me feel the confidence of like who I can be in this profession. And so one of the things that you probably know about is, our Governor Cooper did a really great job really creating the Drive Task Force where we're talking about.
That's where
tell about Drive, because we touched on that with Dyson. I would love to get more into Drive. Yeah, talk about Drive.
But as it's, I'm going to speak as an educator of color who sees this, right? And I'm going to speak again as an educator of color who has experienced microaggressions from families that I may have served and also like some colleagues sometimes. And so what I loved about the report in the Drive Task Force was it's one thing to recruit educators of color, right? We have lots of initiatives going on across the country around 1 million teachers of color coming into the profession. It's also another thing to make sure that you are able to retain what you have. And so how are we making sure that as Eugenia may be experiencing microaggressions and having multiple experiences, whether it be in the classroom or even as the state teacher of the year, what are we doing to make sure that she is fully supported and she's working in an environment where she can thrive and not just survive?
So what are we doing, or what should we be doing that we're not doing?
Well, one of the things I will be honest about is so often a lot of conversations about what people need or what a group of folks need happens in the absence of the group of folks, right? So like, I really think that it's really important that we're intentional around having conversations with the people who are affected the most. If we're talking about underserved and underrepresented students or underserved or underrepresented workforce, then we need to be having conversations with people about and really being honest and ready for that feedback of what we can do to make it a space where you can thrive. One of the things I love recently, not in the last year or so, my school district has equity and empathy ambassadors. And we take students, they're high school students, 11th and 12th graders, who actually come into a collective space once a quarter and they talk with the superintendent. They talk with board members. They talk about what it is that they desire about their educational experience. And it's a wide range. My school district does not necessarily have a high population of Black and brown children. However, they were intentional in making sure that they gained that feedback because, like you said, the data is saying one thing, right?
That's right.
The data about school to prison is saying the same thing in just about every space you go into. But what are we going to do, and what conversations are we going to have with children? And the other part is that, as a Jeans Fellow, what conversations are we going to have with our community?
That's right.
To really be that bridge, to really make sure that educational experience that children are having is one where they can thrive.
So expand a little bit more on the intentionality aspect, because I think you spoke about having opportunities because of intentionality giving to you. And maybe the story where you first time riding a train to DC or something. And, having...
You read up about me.
We did our homework.
That's right.
Yes. Well, I grew up in Chapel Hill, and one of the things I will always say is, as I traveled the state as a state teacher of the year, and as I worked in Chapel Hill, people have a lot of things to say about Chapel Hill. They're like in their own little pod by themselves.
They're better than Duke.
Or we're not like them. And I say to them, everybody got their stuff. And so I love telling people at the end of the day, when I became a teacher, and I'm so sorry I'm getting off topic, but I want to let you know, when I became a teacher, one of the first things I did was I talked to my mother. I said, Mom, I'm about to go into this classroom and be a teacher in Chapel Hill Corporate City Schools. What is it that you, as a Black parent, needed for teachers to make sure they do for me to be successful? And so she went on with all the list of things, right? And so I say all that to say it's really important that we make sure that the access to the opportunities, it's real different when like you got your neighbor or your friend across the friend in your classroom who went to like Cuba. Where they go? Like they went to Aruba for the holidays, and I'm like, yeah, I'm at the house having a good time,
That's
going
right.
to visit. That's a different conversation when it comes to experiences, right? And we know that when children have experiences, they're able to pull from that knowledge and create math problems. There's an EOG question or an assessment about snowboarding. Yes, it was a real thing. And I was like, why are we talking about straps on some skis? Those are different parts of the learning that we can tap into. Wow. But if you don't create that experience for children, then they don't have any connection to it, right? So yes, as a high school student, I was a part of a club called YLI. It was a high school club, but the leaders of the club were a part of the Blue Ribbon Mentor Advocate Program, which is a program that Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools has around mentorship, especially for students of color, and providing mentors within the community and allowing them to have these exposing opportunities. And so I went on my first train ride to Washington, D.C. Never have been to D.C., never have been on a train. And that happened because of intentional opportunities. Like we know that not all of our children are traveling like everyone, like right. Great deal of our children. And how can we create an experience for them to have the exposure? I also was in Avid. Avid exposed me to more college visits than I think I ever had the capacity to put in my brain. Right. And we went to Duke. We went to Carolina, which, they were right there around us. But I also went to HBCUs. I went to A&T. I went to UNCG. I fell in love with the campus. That's why I came. Yeah. Had I not had that visit, I would not have been sure that UNCG was going to be the place for me. Yeah, I did fall in love with the grass, but it left a very high impression, right?
So being intentional is greatly needed to add to having more equitable society.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think when we think about this word equity, I think we really need to be very clear. Equity, I keep telling people, equity is not embedded and threaded in nothing. Equity is what is the lens in which I choose to begin to start work. You can't have an entire plan and say, yeah, equity's in there. No, I use this lens and I thought about these groups of people and I had meetings and I had conversations and we collaborated together and created something. And those are the conversations and the missed opportunities that a lot of people are struggling with right now.
No doubt.
It sounds like you're saying that equity is not just an outcome; it's a process.
It is. It absolutely. It's a way. It's like almost a way of being.
Right.
Like I choose to lean in this way. I can't just say, "Oh, I didn't know that was your experience, Miss Floyd." Did you do some reading about Miss Floyd? Did you do some, did you do some research? Because we'll do this in other aspects of our lives. The things that we care about, we will research. The things that we care about, we will lift up. The things that we care about, we'll assess. And the number one thing that you care about, you'll invest in.
That's right.
I'm going to play serious devil's advocate for a second. And I'm going to ask, as a public school teacher, as an ambassador for public education, what do you say to people who say, I'm with it, equity, opportunity, I want it. Why can't we do this through school choice? Why can't we promote equity through giving people opportunities through our private institutions, right? Why does it have to come through taking my tax dollars and putting them into an institution or a system that I maybe don't believe in? How do you respond to the school defunders?
Okay, so here's my first thought.
And like I said, devil's advocate. All right?
I understand. I know the role in which I have operated in the last couple of years as state teacher of the year. Like it happens. So here's my thing. One of the things that I'm very passionate about, and I've even had this conversation in my family. I think it's really important that we understand. The history major in me is gonna come out. I want to know the private school that you're trying to invest in, whatever it may be. Can you please tell me the year it was established and what was going on in history when it was established?
I can't tell you that, because if I tell you that, then what you will learn is that it was established to keep our schools segregated.
Okay.
And I don't
And
want you to know that.
So that's usually my first point,
Right.
is like, I really want us to be thinking about historically
the context.
how those schools came to be. And I'm not saying every school is that way. I'm not saying that at all. Let me put it on the record. What I am saying is, like, historically, we know why people have run away from public schools in the past.
Right.
And so I'm not quite sure, especially when the demographics of our students in North Carolina have changed, to, like 55% are students of color in public schools. It's not really, it's giving something else right now, right? It's not really giving what the reasoning that you're saying. Right. The other part of that is, I support you going to whatever private school you want to go to, but it does not get to come at the expense of public schools. And here's the other part. When we think about equity, I grew up in a trailer park in Chapel Hill, and I think people forget that there's low income housing in Chapel Hill as well.
They're all mansions in there, right?
Yeah, it's always this Miss Floyd, you grew up very well. Everything was great. Yeah, it was great, because I'm gonna tell you right now, that trailer park, I had the most fun. It was the greatest place, and even the things that you thought about my neighborhood. Well, the kids can't go outside, and it's not safe there. No, it's not safe for you because you're a stranger, just like it wouldn't be safe for anybody else who rolls up in the neighborhood,
right.
And you're just looking out your window like, who is that? Everyone's doing that. But I say that all to say, unless you were knocking on the door of my trailer to make sure that I knew about the opportunity scholarship, then I don't really think that we're actually making sure that everybody has a chance, right? I mean, I just want to be real honest and transparent about that. Like, who is actually having access to this opportunity? And so
you're saying canvassing's a good thing.
So, I mean, you weren't again, I don't think you were knocking on the trailer park doors to say you all can come too.
That's right.
When we say we want everybody, when the people advocating for vouchers, quote unquote, school choice,
it's for everyone.
Asterisk beside everyone, right? I mean, I wouldn't ask for you to comment on this specifically, but I think what you're saying really resonates with me. I believe that all the talk around school choice and vouchers, I mean, it is all a fig leaf. And the ultimate goal is to maintain some degree, some semblance of school segregation under the guise of respectable suburban politics.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I mean,
but that's not. But I don't hear that said often enough. What I hear said is, well, it's taking money from our public schools, and our public schools need money, for XYZ, which is true. Yeah. But what I would like to, this not for present company excluded, for folks outside of this podcast recording, outside of the studio, I want to hear folks call a spade and say what this is really about. Right, which is like you said. When were these private schools? When was it founded? Well, it may have been founded 5 years ago. Maybe been founded 10 years ago.
Maybe today.
But
it's so they can't have those kids in their schools. Right. Kind of what Seneca was talking about. We don't want those kids.
And just like I do in my work, and when you say that, it resonates with me so much, because in the work that I do, we're not referring to those kids, these kids. Like, they're all of ours. This is our community. And this community should be one in which every child has the opportunity to thrive, right? And as I talk about, you're not knocking on my trailer park door to talk to me about the scholarships or opportunity scholarships. But you know who did knock on my door? My pre-K teacher, when it came time for me to come to school, to public school. And so, I think about who was actually there for me, who actually made sure that I had opportunities, who, when we were intentional, I thrived, right? And again, we all have areas to grow, but also it's hard to grow when I'm working with crumbs, right? That's when I'm giving crumbs to, you give me crumbs, but you want filet mignon.
Right.
And so I think that's also something that needs to be really lifted up, of like, public schools are doing amazing things. I traveled to 66 school districts in my sabbatical year as state teacher of the year. I saw amazing things. And I can tell you right now, Alamance County's CTE, The building that they had was one of the most amazing opportunities I saw. I was like, wow. I was like, this is down the street from my school this year. We got to come up here and take some notes.
right.
Like, it was an amazing experience. So, like, why are we taking that away from anyone? That's an opportunity. That's an exposure to a career, to all types of ways of life for children.
Yeah, I think one of the things I find so ironic is that public officials, politicians, voters who express concern about crime and law and order are the same people who don't want to invest in public education, which we know is one of the biggest ways to prevent crime, to prevent poverty, right? They don't want to invest in the preventative measures. They want to be punitive. They want to be reactive.
That's right.
And so I really appreciate that you're highlighting just, look, it's our schools, yes, there are problems, but they are already doing amazing things.
Yes.
And it's not a question of do we save our schools? It's how do we how do we give them the tools they need to continue doing what in many ways they are already doing?
And make those things reoccurring, because a lot of schools are doing fabulous things because of wonderful grant makers who are just like, you know what, we got teachers literally writing grants. Like, they're writing like thesis statements, master's level grant writing things to make sure that they have basic supplies to create an experience
while
in the
they're
classroom.
grading papers, while they're herding cats.
Yes.
All of it. Yeah.
So,
man, this is you and I spoke, and it kind of go back to what you last said. We spoke before we had this, to ask you to come on the show.
We did.
And we talked about to have a strong public school, you got to have a strong community.
You do.
And, it's really hard to, well, I guess I would just like your input on how do we build a strong community when we have some community. And I think that's the age-old question. Everybody wants to have a build community. I ran on that for my campaign as we build community.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a community, Alamance, for instance, but we also have it across the state and all kinds of other counties, where you have part of the community saying we're about to redistrict and we don't want those kids at our schools. How do we try to bring to the table each other and have conversations about the importance of a strong community?
I think, like you're saying, like our communities, our strong communities, and even in the classroom, like all of the work and everything we're talking about is contingent on relationship. Like, we have to have a conversation about when you say those kids, my next question is like, who you talking about? Right? And they're like the call out part, right? Like, who are you talking about?
Define those kids.
I need you to define that. And I want you to name that thing, because I also want to talk to you about, like, if you're saying those kids are a product of this community. So if we are being, again, I go back to being reflective in your practice.
Hold that mirror up,
if
right?
we're going, there it is, right? Like, if we're going to reflect, like, what did we as a community do to make it so that I'm having this narrative in my head, right? Like, what did we as a community, what moves did we make that makes those kids, right? Like, that's not on them. And you don't get to predict the life or the achievements or the success that this child can have based on the current circumstance, right?
Man.
No one really thought that the girl from the trailer park was going to be the North Carolina Teacher of the Year.
Oh, go ahead.
You know what I'm saying? And you don't get to make that prediction on my life. You don't get to make that prediction on any child's life. And so, if anything, we need to be changing that and thinking to ourselves like, nah, it's not those kids. That's our children. They're all of our children. And we are our community. We created that, right? We created them. So what are we going to do to make sure that they, again, will have the success that they in the choice that they desire?
That's right.
So.
I love that. I mean, I think what is community if not a mindset that we are responsible to each other and for each other?
And we do it in other aspects, because the same, the same people who will say those communities will say, like, the great Christian woman in me. And I'm
That's
like,
right.
wait. We're still talking about our whole community, right? So the great Christian woman in me believes that we're working for everybody. We're pulling everyone in. All of our voices should be heard. Everyone should be at the table. Let's build this relationship so that our community can thrive. So that's honestly the best advice I can give, is just really building relationship. One of the first things I do in my classroom every school year, we used to have a circle. We would get all the kids in a circle. And one of the things I'm a true believer of, like, the kids are stuck with me for 180 days. So as I put my like Marvel characters all over the classroom, and I got that one kid that loves DC, like I've already missed that mark right there. Like, that was a missed opportunity. However,
that's unfortunate because he's wrong. I mean, Marvel is better than DC, but I love
my
me some
babies
Batman.
my babies have choices.
Yeah, that's right.
But also I think about how we get in this circle and we decide, we establish what our community's about to be. And we establish that by thinking about the rules. I was the literacy teacher. I talk about them. I tell the kids, what is it that you want your reading time to look like? What do you envision? The perfect reading time? And they'll be like, Miss Floyd, can we have comfy chairs? I really need it people to be quiet. And I like to wear headphones. And everybody has these different needs and these different things that make them be the best reader that they can be. And so, like, when are we going to circle up? I suggest that we as a community, let's circle up and have a conversation about what is it that you need to thrive? What is it that you need to be successful? Because one thing about kids, if you open that door, they'll tell you exactly
they will let you know
what they need. And we established our community rules right there together.
Man, we need to be more that childlike or
we do.
kid-like, because they, like you said, they will just spill the beans without having that anxiety of making somebody uncomfortable.
And we got to do something with it too.
Yes.
Because you cannot have people share their stories and you make a choice to use none of it. Because that creates even more harm, and no restoration can happen that way.
Well, so we're coming up on time to kind of, I guess, wind down a little bit. This has been burning at me ever since you mentioned, cinema time in the classroom, movie time. What is one movie that you gotta show as a teacher that you show and you're like, this is, I mean, just this is gonna make that impact for that kid? I had my movies that I always showed.
Well, like that I would show the kids.
Well, I mean,
I'm just like thinking about like, what do me and my niece and nephew love?
Or any of that. I'm just curious. What.
I honestly, when it comes to movies in the classroom, like my kids had a lot of choice. Like it's on them. But like I will say, my niece and nephews, we really love Big Hero 6. You got that little traumatic moment where we sad Tadashi dies. But then you see him find his way and work through his grief, and Baymax is his friend, and I just really love that movie.
It's a great one. Yeah.
One of the movies that I love the most, that I don't really show the kids the movie, but I do let them know the power that they have as children. I tell them that there is a movie out there that I watched when I was in the Youth Leadership Institute. And this was an opportunity. They would take us to summer camp. And at camp, we would talk about this one movie. This movie was called The Children's March. And this movie is about the just integration of schools and just fighting segregation. And you would see these kids getting arrested and, dancing in the park while the hoses are being run all over them. And I want my kids to understand, I don't show them the movie, but I let them understand, like, you all have so much power to change what you are seeing. Children were the pioneers and the people that really rushed the civil rights movement, because what other countries can handle, we couldn't handle being looked at as we turned hose on children. We couldn't handle that, right? And so I just think about how powerful our children are, and it is super important that we continue to listen to them and lift up their voices.
Well, our kids are extremely lucky to have you as an advocate, as a teacher, as a champion. Thank you. We are lucky to have you as a guest. Eugenia, thank you so much for coming on the Hometown Holler. Where can folks find you on social media? I am on X. It's weird to say that. I know. I refuse. It's still Twitter to me, but yes.
I'm on X and Instagram at Gina4, the number 4, lit. And I am on Facebook, of course, Eugenia Floyd.
Excellent.
This is awesome. Thanks again. I couldn't ask. Well, can we have you back again?
Absolutely. I would love to come. I want to be a friend of the Holler.
Friend of the Holler. Absolutely.
I mean, if you let me be a friend, I'll definitely come back.
It'd be our privilege and honor. Excellent. Well, until next time, Eugenia, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.